Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education.
In this week's episode, we discuss the profession of being a preschool teacher, all the wonderful things about it, as well as the challenges that come with it. Our guest, Ashley Preston, is the 2016 New Hampshire Teacher of the Year and is an active preschool teacher at Parker Varney Elementary School in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'll take a quote directly from her 2016 Teacher of the Year application that I think sums up her views best. Preschool students are often underestimated, and I feel fortunate that I can be their voice, help them gain the recognition they deserve, and prove their learning is valuable no matter what it looks like from the outside. To learn more about how we can speak out about the all-important role of preschool teachers, stay tuned for this week's episode of the Preschool Podcast. Ashley, welcome to the Preschool Podcast. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
First question for you is, what brought you into being a preschool teacher in the first place?
Well, I actually didn't start out thinking I would be a preschool teacher. When I went to school, I knew I wanted to work with younger students. I was young myself. I didn't really know a lot about public preschool and what was out there for preschool. I was sort of ignorant in my thinking that preschool was really just daycare and childcare. I didn't realize how big of a presence it had in the public school system. So I went on an interview in my local district because I was hoping to be able to work where I live. And they had an opening in the preschool program, so I figured I would go for it and kind of try it out and get myself out there. And I just loved it, and I don't think there's ever another grade level I want to go to. I never thought I'd be here, and now that I'm here, I realize it's the grade level and age group that I belong with for sure.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing it?
This is the start of my 11th year.
Cool. And what is it that you love most about what you do? I know that's a hard question because I'm sure you love lots of parts of it.
There are a lot of parts. But really, I think working with such young kids, I mean, first of all, we have natural development on our side and working along with us as teachers, which is very, very helpful. But the progress that I get to see my kids make, and they're so young, they're still so curious and inquisitive, and they're willing to try anything I put out there. And because of that, they learn these amazing things that they don't even know because they're not afraid to do new things and try new things. And they're not as worried about, as older kids are, about making mistakes or being wrong. And I have Manchester is an inner city. We have a high refugee population. And, I have kids come in at all different levels with, not a lot of language or very low early academic skills. And just to see them be completely different kids when they walk out of my door 2 years later before they go to kindergarten, speaking full sentences, being able to work on a team, being able to problem solve, knowing their letters, writing their names. It's just seeing them and seeing them learn in their progress is the best part.
Awesome. And on the flip side, what is the most challenging thing about being a preschool teacher?
Well, I would say it's sort of a twofold. Being a preschool teacher, sometimes I feel like I get treated just like a preschool student. Like, oh, you're cute, you're the preschool teacher. Like, you just play and don't do anything important all day. There's a lot of so that just goes with, there's a lot of misconception about preschool and what we do, and that our learning and our teaching is super important and valid in the whole entire education spectrum. That's one of the hardest parts. I feel like I'm constantly defending myself, our methods, and our students as being an important piece of the, people say the K-12 education system, and I would love to live in a place where we talked about the K-12 education system.
Totally. And just before we started this conversation, I was just sort of looking around, and I was looking at, National Teacher of the Year awards, and I looked through the past winners, and since 1952, I think I see only two National Teachers of the Year, which were at the kindergarten level. And all the others were through K-12. And that's why I think it's really cool that we have you as a preschool teacher as New Hampshire Teacher of the Year, because I think that getting that word out, like you said, about the importance of preschool teachers in children's learning and development and in the education system in its totality is just so important.
Yes, and I'm the first preschool teacher ever from New Hampshire, so that was like an awesome accomplishment for me that I was proud to be able to share with my students and my other preschool teacher friends.
Totally. Now, you've explained a little bit about what what you find to be a challenge of being a preschool teacher. Why do you think that preschool teachers and students are underestimated?
Well, the kids are little, so you don't remember being a little kid. You might remember if you are a parent when your kids were little, but I think they're not given credit for what they can do and what they are capable of, because we don't do things like read and write stories. We might not be able to draw the best pictures because we're learning how to use pencils and crayons, but people get caught up in all the things they can't do, so they don't see all the things that they can do. And then I think a lot of it is that people are still stuck in different mentalities from a different time of life. My mom didn't have to work. She got to stay home and take care of me. I didn't go to school until I went to kindergarten. So people think, oh, it's a parent's job to do this early childhood education. These people that want free preschool, just want free babysitting. And that's not, I'm not a babysitter. I'm a teacher. I'm giving these kids actual life skills that are going to help them not only in school, but in their future life. Being able to communicate, being able to work with a friend to solve a problem, being creative. A lot of that stuff can get lost in older grades when we're taking tests and, have all these standards that we have to follow. We got to get those critical thinking skills in there, and those the learning to learn how to be a student, how to walk in the hallway, how to sit in a group, how to wait your turn. Those are skills that we need in adult life too. We just don't think of them that way once we're adults, because we're adults now, so we think we have it all figured out.
Yeah. So kind of what you're saying is that it's the definition of learning. So I think, like you said, now that we're adults, we think we have everything figured out, and reading, writing, and arithmetic is, if you can do those things, you're learning a lot. But it's more than that. Well,
and people don't realize that play is learning, because when you become an adult, you forget how to play, and it is more of a forced thing. And they don't realize that when young kids who don't have all those like preconceived notions and adult biases that we develop in life, that they just use their imagination and play and explore, that's how they're learning about their world. And especially for our population, where they might not have the life experiences that other children are able to have, that's so valuable and important for them, because I see it, the difference between the kids that have been in, even not just our preschool program, but any type of program, early childhood program, that walk into kindergarten versus kids who have never been in school before and walk into kindergarten. And those kids, they're at a disadvantage. The kids that never came to any type of early childhood programming before. They are not only figuring out how to be a part of school, they may already be behind in their academics. They don't know anyone. They've been home for 5 years of their life, when the majority of their brain development happened, and now they have all these demands and pressure and learning, and you definitely see the struggle for those kids.
Now, this is a really tough question, and there's no easy answer to it, but do you have any thoughts about what we can do to change the view that many people have about preschool teachers and students?
Well, I'm sure it's hard to change people's minds. People believe what they believe for their reasons. They have had their own past experiences that brought them to their conclusions. I try to just open my classroom door and invite people in and engage them in meaningful conversations to try to tell them what I do. People don't not know to be mean, and they're not necessarily saying these things to be mean, but it's just their experience isn't what is actually happening in preschool today, and they don't get it and see it. And so I try to, invite our school board members into our classroom, talk to parents when I can talk to parents, being able to be teacher of the year this year and get out there and network with people has given me a chance to show what preschool students are capable of and what kind of meaningful learning we as teachers provide them with. And so it's just spreading the word is one of the simplest ways, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do either. It's a simple idea, but not an easy thing to do. Because I think that people have to see it to understand it. Because I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but that doesn't mean anyone's going to believe me.
Yeah, exactly.
Either. Because am I just trying to promote my own cause when this cause has actually nothing to do with me? It's about these kids. And that was why winning meant so much to me, not just for me. I mean, obviously that's a huge event in my life that I will never forget, but it meant a lot to me for my students. I had a great group of students that went through that whole process with me, and to be able to share that with them, and because they're the ones that made me shine. When the Department of Ed came into my classroom, they weren't talking to me, they were talking to my students. They were down on the floor playing with them and seeing how awesome they are, and I still tell everybody that's why I won. It had nothing to do with me, it was with kids.
So it's great that you have been given this opportunity to be a spokesperson for preschool teachers, and I think that's super important. Do you have any advice for preschool teachers out there generally about speaking up for what's right and for their profession? I know you mentioned meaningful conversations with families. Is that like the best way to really spread the word to parents and families about the importance of your work?
Well, I don't know if that's the best way. I think that's like I said, it's an easier method because I think for teachers in general, and this isn't just for preschool teachers, I think it's hard for us to find our voice because there's a lot of negativity around teaching. There's a lot of bad, rumors and stories and what we do and what we don't do. And teachers have a lot of fear for speaking up, I think. I know that I was afraid of my voice even when this whole Teacher of the Year process started. It's now that I'm sort of coming to the end of my year, I feel less afraid of my voice and more believe in my voice more. But I think we need to believe in ourselves and not be afraid to have those conversations, and not just with parents, with other teachers. I'm in an elementary school, so I'm able to get out there and work with the kindergarten teachers and talk to the first grade teachers and have fifth grade students come down and read to my kids and develop those partnerships so that it's not just like me knowing. It can't just be preschool teachers that know how important what we do and how important our students are. We have to talk to other teachers, talk to school board members, talk to state departments, all very scary stuff. I still don't like to do any of that stuff, but we just have to believe in our voice and not be afraid to use it because our kids don't have a voice and someone's going to speak up for them. And I think just educating the public, like I said, having those conversations, getting people in your classrooms is one of the few ways to start, because it's not like the research doesn't exist to show about brain development and why, the science behind preschool is out there. I don't know why people don't like to listen to it, but, learning about that, more of that yourself, I've been trying to have more of that like science and data research when I do go out and talk. So I'm not just telling my stories. I think our stories are the most important things because people can make the emotional attachments to them. But I think we need those like scientific facts with us so that the people that doubt can then have more concrete things to grasp onto.
Absolutely. And we actually just covered that in our last episode of the Preschool podcast, talking about brain development and all the science behind it. And you're absolutely right. There's a ton of information there which says very conclusively just how important learning and development is between the ages of 0 and 5. Now, you said that you're coming up on the end of your year as New Hampshire Teacher of the Year, and that's giving you more confidence in speaking out about what you believe in and speaking out on behalf of preschool teachers and teachers generally. What motivated you or inspired you to go down the journey of Teacher of the Year in the first place?
Well, my principal nominated me. I was quite shocked, to be honest with you, when I found out about my nomination. I didn't actually believe the email was real. So, I was kind of set on this path, and I could have gotten off of it, but I sort of decided to write it out sort of to see what it was all about. And then the deeper I got into it, I saw how me as a preschool teacher being a part of this process and making it through this process was really important for the rest of the preschool world out there, because we have never had a preschool teacher of the year in New Hampshire. I don't know if any state has ever had a preschool teacher win their state teacher of the year. I know in my class from across the country there were a few kindergarten teachers, a couple first and second grade, but there was no other preschool teachers. And once I started on the path, I just decided to keep writing it. I didn't want to get off. I wanted to be able to keep talking about preschool. People were all of a sudden paying attention to us, and I didn't want to let that go, because we are important. We've been ignored for a long time, and I think our students are super valuable, and if we had more kids in preschool and we were educating them and helping them earlier, maybe we would have less of the issues we have in the older grades. All of our students are important, preschool through 12th grade, but we've got to start helping these kids earlier so that we don't need to help them as much when they're older, and instead we can be setting them on further paths of success, instead of failing on them before they even walk through the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it all starts, right? I just want to change direction just a little bit here. You were talking before about, having those meaningful conversations with families, and educating families about what preschool teachers do. I see you also have spent some time working at Child Find, where you meet families. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do with Child Find?
Okay, so Child Find is the simplest way to explain it, I guess. It's our intake department for preschool students. Typically an elementary student, if they're in school and there becomes concerns that they might have special education needs, there's a whole referral process that works within the school. Because preschool students aren't in school, they go through the Child Find agency. So when I was there, I did some of the academic testing. So I was just doing the evaluations to determine whether or not they had needs in special education needs. But I was mostly there to facilitate meetings and work with parents and sort of guide them through the special education process, figure out what the best program needs for their children are, and kind of educating parents about what we're doing. And, the special ed component adds a whole nother layer to preschool. We get parents that are resistant to that because they don't want their child to have an IEP. They don't think anything, and I don't like to even say there's anything wrong with them, because there's not anything. Just because your child has an IEP doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. But they have a different learning style that we need to figure out so that they can be successful in life. And Manchester has a really big refugee population, so there's a lot of cultural barriers in the special ed kind of department. So I always tried to be a reassuring voice that what we're doing is we're helping your children. And it's at the preschool level. This is one of the great things about little kids, that nobody realizes what's different about you versus me versus him versus her. They just all are together, which is always so awesome to see. I mean, I have these super diverse classes with kids that come from different backgrounds and different countries and different cultures, and some have special needs, some don't have special needs, some speak different languages, others don't. And to see them coexist in this happy little place is, it's nice to see, and it gives me hope for the future that maybe, we can get ourselves back to a place where people can get along. But a lot of parents, this is their first experience, and, they're finding out that their child does have difficulties and struggles, and we have to be there to reassure them that what we're doing is helping them, and we're not just playing all day, and this is how they're learning, and it's not this stigma. Having an IEP isn't a bad thing. It's a way to help your child, and we all learn different. I mean, in reality, everybody learns different. You could, special needs are, I think everybody has some degree of special needs, and things they're good at and things they're bad at, and I just try to reinforce that in some ways we want to individually educate all of these kids. That's the move that we're making, that more individualized education and personalized learning, and really an IEP is a personalized learning plan. For federal regulations, we have to put special ed on it, but we can look at it as a positive thing and not a negative thing.
What were some of your learnings from those conversations with the families?
Well, I was able to, I was born in Rhode Island, and now I live in New Hampshire. My diverseness was not very large until I started working in Manchester, and I was able to learn a lot about different cultures and why people have these preconceived notions and how to help parents and reassure parents. Just learning about when I started, I didn't have any children of my own, so I've worked hard to try to put myself in these people's shoes and think about what would I feel like. Now I do have my own daughter, and just to try to see where they are, because we need to be a team. It can't be like a parent and a teacher. It needs to be a parent with a teacher working together. I only spend 2.5 hours, 3 or 4 days a week with these children. Their parents are their first teachers. Their parents are their biggest teacher at this point. And if we're not a team, the success isn't going to be there as great as if we do work together.
Totally, which I think speaks to why it's also just so important for families to understand the importance of early childhood development, right?
Yes, most definitely. Because I have parents that, so what are we going to teach? Like, what are they going to learn? Like, and they want, we're going to learn X, Y, Z. Like, they want black and white concrete answers about what we're going to learn. And I'm like, well, that's not what we're kind of about. Like, we're learning to learn. We're learning to be a good friend. And it's not that we don't do academics, because we do academics, but it's kind of when they're ready and at their pace. And we do have preschool standards in Manchester, but it's a roadmap. It's not like everybody has to fit into this column on this chart. It's like, this is the path we have to take to get to be college and career ready someday. So it's nice to have that guide, but I always make sure that when I talk to parents, when I talk to other colleagues that aren't sure, this isn't like take a test, get a A or B, and go on. It's a whole curve, it's a whole process, and you have to follow it naturally, because at this age, you have to work with the natural development, or you're going to end up stunting them and causing them to hate school, because you're going to fight what's naturally happening with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that we also think is really important for the progress of the field of early childhood education and for preschool teachers is getting knowledge and information about what's happening, what's important, what are people talking about, so that as a preschool teacher, you're also learning all the time. Is there certain places where you go to get information about what's happening in the preschool or early childhood education world?
Well, I mean, I do. So our preschool, we don't have a central preschool location in Manchester. We're kind of spread out through some of the elementary schools, but we're lucky enough that we have opportunities to collaborate and talk to each other as a team. And I think teachers need to stop shutting their doors and working as separate islands and work together as one group, because anytime I've gone to a conference or a workshop or a training, I learn the most from the presenters when they're in the trenches, in the field, walking out of, like, they just walked out of a classroom yesterday to come and give me this workshop today. Not the person that, was a consultant 25 years ago and hasn't been doing what I do. Because what I do now as a preschool teacher is very different from what preschool teachers did even from when I started 10 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, it's completely different. So I think we need to utilize each other as resources, and I try to do that as much as possible. I mean, I look to professional organizations. There's a lot of early childhood groups, NAEYC. I look to those resources. I try to find learning opportunities, teacher workshop opportunities that are specifically geared towards preschool, which is a harder path to take, unfortunately. A lot of things, they call them early childhood, but they really focus on kindergarten, first and second grade. And despite popular belief, preschool and kindergarten, while similar, are very different creatures. A 4 and a 5-year-old are not alike in as many ways as people think they are. A 3 and a 4-year-old are not alike. A 3 and a 5-year-old are nothing alike, So we get that watered down learning a lot, unfortunately. I've been lucky enough to be doing this for 10 years now and working with people who've been doing it even longer, that we're good at going to these things and taking what they are kind of watering down for us and figuring out how we can make it work for what we know and who we work with. But I think my co-teachers are one of my best resources, which is sort of a great thing, but then a sad thing because there's so many resources available for teachers of other grade levels. And it's that, again, that preschool kind of gets pushed aside and brushed under the rug and, just read the kindergarten book and then kind of figure it out. Hopefully as early childhood is gaining more importance across the nation, more of those real learning opportunities and networking groups and organizations will kind of open up for us. But it's hard because, and a lot of it too, like for Teacher of the Year, preschool teachers used to not even be eligible because preschool wasn't in the public school. Because the Teacher of the Year is a public school thing, and that's understandable, but they weren't even eligible to be nominated. And I think we need to stop working against each other. They have childcare versus daycare versus public preschool, and we almost, I feel like, seem like enemies on the outside, and I don't think it should. I wish it wasn't like that, because I think that we can all work together. People fear public preschool because then there'll be no childcare and all those places will go out of business, but I don't necessarily know that's 100% true. Public preschool wouldn't have worked for me because I worked full-time and it's a half-day program. My daughter had to go to private preschool. Some parents, half-day works for them. So I think we just got to help each other and work together.
The children's education is not so black and white as to say preschool versus public school. It should be a continuous process that's really irrespective of those different notions, really, isn't it? What is exciting you most about what's happening in early childhood education right now?
I'm just happy that people are actually talking about it. It's nice to see that there are more people taking it seriously. I was fortunate enough to go to a conference in Washington and met this woman from Alabama who actually is not even in education. She's a lawyer, but she grew up and had a really rough start of life, and preschool saved her life, she says. And she now has, and it's so important to her, even though she's a lawyer and not in the education field, she goes out and she talks to school districts and school boards, and she worked really closely with the Alabama Department of Education, and state of Alabama is on a 10-year plan right now for universal preschool for 4-year-olds. That preschool, pre-kindergarten, those words I feel like mean different things and get used interchangeably. I'm one of the people that uses them interchangeably. I know there's a big push for that 4-year-olds to get in school, which is great. We have 3-year-old and 4-year-old preschool in my school district. It's not universal. It's mandatory for special ed students. We get Title I funding, so it's not mandatory for Title I, but we do have a Title I kind of preschool population too. They are in the same classes. It's not like self-contained classes and then Title I classes. We have, full inclusion classrooms, which is awesome. But it's nice to see it more places and being considered a more valuable thing. I think we still have a really, really large mountain to climb, but it's nice to know that there's more people kind of like joining the hike and believing in the power of preschool.
And last question, and a difficult one. As a preschool teacher, how do you go about being a leader in early childhood education to be this voice and get that word out there?
That is the tough one. And honestly, like on a personal level, I struggle a little bit with that whole word leader because I don't see myself as a leader, but I think that actually is happening even if I want to keep denying that it's happening. How to be that leader it takes a lot of confidence and believing in what you're saying. And I just think being an advocate, like I said, I'm going to go speak at the school board meeting next week. I talk to our aldermen when they come in the building. Like when we have those, city officials here, I try to make sure I'm out there and I say hi and oh, I'm the preschool teacher. Did you want to come to my room and see what we're doing? And I try to get them to engage because we're not perceived as leaders, so we need to get the people that are like publicly perceived as leaders on board and on our side to help elevate us and kind of, unfortunately, we need somebody else to help shine the light. And that's why when I met the lawyer, I loved her because she was standing up in front of a group of people that I don't know if would have taken anything I said seriously, but because she was a lawyer, they were listening to her. Even though her cause is the same as my cause, I felt like, sadly, it had more weight coming out of her mouth. But the more people like that we have on our side, we can work together and become leaders together.
Yeah, and surely if she didn't have an amazing preschool teacher that gave her this strong feeling about how important it is, she wouldn't be up there speaking.
Yeah, her life could have gone down a very, very sad, different path. I mean, she told her whole story in front of this whole room of people, and people were crying. It was very sad. And she's like, preschool saved my life, and I was like, yay! She made my heart very happy that day. I went and introduced myself after, and I just said, you know, as a preschool teacher, I just thank you for being on our side and for having somebody else. Because like I said, I can think I'm a leader, even if I don't think I'm a leader. I can think I'm a leader and talk away, but if people just keep looking at me like the cute little preschool teacher, like I sometimes feel like they look at me like I'm 4, it doesn't matter how smart I sound or how great what my message is if people don't take me seriously. But we have to also take ourselves seriously and believe that we're important and what we're doing matters.
I think that's a very important point, actually. Preschool teachers showing the world that the work that they do is important and they should be treated with respect, and also the perception that they are professionals is, I think, a very important point. And like you said, it starts with the preschool teachers themselves. And it sounds like, you know, with hearing some of your stories, that if you do an awesome job at what it is you do, which is working with the children, your relationships with the children and the families, and spreading the word in your local community about what you're doing as a preschool teacher, if every preschool teacher did that, then the word would spread, and it would spread pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And just believing in our students. And it's hard to sometimes, with all like what I call the teacher hate out there, to not get caught up in the negativity and what they can't. I mean, and we get caught up. Everybody has their moments, you know, because I work with kids that have so many struggles and trauma and issues. You have to rise above that so that they can rise above that and not think about what they can't do and find what they can do, because they can all do something, and when we hone in on that and elevate that, all the other stuff will fall into place and rise up with them.
Totally. Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was really wonderful having you. Some very powerful stuff there, and I think it's amazing that you're going to be a spokesperson for preschool teachers everywhere.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm glad to be able to get out there and just remind everybody that preschool matters.
Wicked.
What's your name? Michaela, how are you?
Hi.
You having fun playing?
Yes.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to play out here?
Playing monsters.
You like to play monsters? Do you like the swings? Okay. What else you like to do?
Play my Dora bike.
Oh, with your Dora bike? Oh, okay. Do you ride fast?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, have fun here. All right.